Hello, guys. Welcome into another episode here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. This is Bolt Breakdowns, and I want to talk about some recent Chargers news that did happen over the weekend. The Chargers, right after our Q&A stream on Saturday, actually announced that they reached a deal with former Rams linebacker now Troy Reeder, who is now staying, I should say, in Los Angeles. And so this is going to be an interesting signing to see where the Chargers, stand on all of this with their linebacker room. We actually, if you want to go back to that Q&A, talked about it in depth before this signing happened. It was like, okay, well, they have Kenneth Murray, they have Amon Ogbongbemiga. We've kind of been going back and forth on how high are they on those guys, particularly the latter half. Of course, they want Kenneth Murray to succeed as a former first-round pick for the team, but it'll be interesting to see how this all kind of changes with Troy Reeder now in the fold. So let's get more specifically into Reeder now. It is a 1-year deal that will have him on the Chargers. This original report was from Mike Kay. And so, yeah, it's a 1-year deal. He's staying in Los Angeles and going cross town from the Rams to the Chargers. That's what some people wanted to happen with other Rams free agents, but Troy Reeder, now a Charger. Let's kind of get into his role on this team. And before we get into any of the metrics and talk about his level of play, I think this is the more interesting thing to talk about. Kenneth Murray, Amon Ogbongbemiga, Drew Tranquill, Troy Reeder, Nick Niemann, Cole Christiansen kind of now make up that linebacker room. And the main question I have for this signing as a whole is a question that Tyler actually had. What is Troy Reeder's role, right? Because Troy Reeder has a lot of problems, I think, as a football player. But if you have him as kind of a scheme fit, as someone who's only going to be playing closer to the line, is he going to be playing, potentially closer to the secondary at the second level? I think basically, is he linebacker too, right? You look at this kind of depth chart right here, and you see that that's possible, right? We kind of know that they're going to favor Kenneth Murray a lot, but we know that they played Drew Tranquill a little less last year. They say that they're high on Amon Ogbongbemiga, but are they? Are they just comfortable with leaving Nick Niemann on special teams? Or are they going to use him more in the system? There's really a realistic path to Troy Reeder becoming the Chargers linebacker too. And that is kind of going to be interesting. Is he potentially starting over Drew Tranquill? That's also a possibility because we're very vague on what the Chargers feel about Tranquill as a whole after last year. He did play earlier in the season, but then later in the year was kind of more relegated to special teams, except when obviously he was needed to play because of COVID and injuries on the defense. Is he just depth? Is he linebacker 4? Is he linebacker 5? I don't think it has anything to do with Murray's surgery personally. I think this just is a move that gets Brandon Staley a guy he's familiar with in the system. But I think all of these questions really do apply to this signing. I am fine with the Troy Reeder signing, depending on what his role is. And so that is kind of, I guess we should specifically get into Troy Reeder now. This is kind of what the analytics say about Troy Reeder. You sort of look at, this was actually his 2020 season under Brandon Staley, and he actually had his best season. Overall, decent linebacker, so run defender. I think if you actually go back to this season, his missed tackle rate was 12.9, never great. But he actually, as a pass rusher, and when he attacks, I think the line of scrimmage, when he attacks, a left tackle, right tackle, is actually very good. I think at rushing the passer from what we had kind of seen in 2020 and some parts of 2021. Coverage, unfortunately, is a pretty big weakness for Reeder. And if you watched in the NFC Championship game, if you watched other Rams games from this year, you'll know that opposing offenses, when Troy Reeder was on the field, really went at him. And there's no better example of that than the NFC Championship game with one Kyle Shanahan, where it looked like Troy Reeder just was able to stand in the frame on every first down on your TV screen. And so that is the not so good stuff. Of course, when we talk about PFF grades, this is obviously just his regular season performance. Now, this is 2021 when we talk about the Raheem Morris defense, and Reeder took a hit in practically every category except pass rush. Like I mentioned before, his run defense was worse, coverage was worse, allowed the most yards and I think receptions of his career. and then just overall was not very good as a linebacker. Let's dive more specifically into the numbers here. The missed tackle rate is what really concerns me about this signing because the Chargers in the linebacker room right now don't have a lot of guys that can tackle particularly well. Kenneth Murray's missed tackle rates have been pretty high as of late. Drew Tranquil, I think, is a pretty effective tackler. But other than him, I think you're relying on Eamon Ogbongbemiga and Kenneth Murray to carry a lot of load when it comes to more standard run defense tackling. And now adding Reader into that equation, his missed tackle rate has not been dropping. It was 19.4 in his original season, but really it's kind of stabilized around 12 to 13% missed tackle rate, which is not good given the amount of snaps that he's playing. So when your snaps are increasing every year, you don't want your missed tackle rate to stay the same, especially that just kind of means that you're still that much of a liability on an even larger number of snaps. So that's not great. But and we talk about his problems in coverage a little bit. Obviously, this is kind of a tic-tac stat. You could take whatever you want from it, but it's a little bit. He did play 700 snaps and ended up giving up 361 yards and had an 80% reception percentage, allowed 40 receptions on 51 targets. So there definitely was a nature to Reader's game where defense or offenses decided to go after him. And so I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem. The more specifically concerning thing than just yards is, during the catch is yards after the catch, right? So a lot of these situations where defenses able to beat Reader and then the receiver kind of runs for, or I should say, offense is beating Reader and then basically taking advantage of the yak opportunities that he gave up after he missed the tackle or after something happened where he kind of fell out of the play after a certain point. So I do think the yak is a little bit concerning as well. But all of that being said, I do think there are some advantages to Troy Reader, such as scheme familiarity. He is familiar with Brandon Staley. And if you actually look at some of his film, I don't think it's all bad. I think you can kind of look at some of his film here, right? This is actually a good example of a pretty clean hit from Troy Reader. He's actually a good tackler when he is decisive. And I think that this is something to specify as to when he's decisive because, he can get faked out on a play, which I'll show you in a second, and therefore just completely miss the tackle or miss where the ball is going. But I think as you can see here, he actually is a pretty solid tackler when he is, efficient and making his decision about when to make a play on the ball or on a receiver who's getting the ball, right? So that I think is good. We'll get into some of the negative later, but this is sort of also what Troy Reader, I think, is very good at. Just look at him just blow up this poor right tackle over here. So when he's playing close to the line of scrimmage, when he's making compact plays, Troy Reader is actually pretty fine in these instances, and I think you can actually get a lot out of his usage. So that is going to be interesting to see how far the Chargers take that. This is also a play. I don't remember if this is from the NFC Championship game or if it's from the regular season. I think the regular season, but he ends up taking a bump here and is able to really, I think that's Juszczyk. And Juszczyk is one of the better blocking fullbacks in the league. And he just absolutely puts him on his ass here in order to obviously didn't make the tackle, but then leads to this opportunity to get the tackle here. And that was, taking Juszczyk out of the play. So when he can play very compact to the line of scrimmage, I think that Reader is an effective player. But and there's always a but when it comes to Troy Reader, I suppose. The real issue is, I think, his vision and when plays get to the second level, when they get to the third level in pass coverage situations, what he's going to do. So you can kind of see that in this instance, for example, he gets faked out really bad here by a wide receiver just kind of running across the field. And then, Troy Reader just we get spin cycles himself really out of the play and then isn't in position to make a tackle. And he's the primary reason why this ball ends up going for like a 20-yard gain because he's not in the right position to make a tackle. And so a lot of that does happen with Troy Reader, and that is a play that would not go under his missed tackle statistical category. but is a play that is caused by him missing the opportunity to tackle, if that makes any sense. So all of that being said, I think there are positives and negatives to Troy Reader, right? We talked about his pass rush skills, which I think can be used to an effective degree. But I wonder how much those pass rush skills are really worth, I guess is sort of what I'm saying, because Drew Tranquil is someone who's been capable of rushing the passer and been capable of blitzing, getting a couple sacks, getting a couple pressures here and there. So is it worth the obvious deficiencies when the run game gets to the second level and the obvious deficiencies in pass coverage just to have kind of a situational linebacker who's like going to blitz? Maybe that's valuable to Staley, or again, that could just be very broad scheme familiarity, which is what Staley has talked about with some of his guys. But I really hope that the signing doesn't go the way of Eric Banks, where it's like, oh, I know that guy, I'm familiar with him, and he's cut. I don't think that'll happen with Troy Reader. Troy Reader is a player who's going to be very important this season. I don't know if he'll be linebacker too, but I do think he's going to play a large portion of snaps just because of the nature of linebacker as well. These guys get hurt a lot, right? And I don't think that's a stretch to say with how, especially how the Chargers room is kind of concocted and the questions about Kenneth Murray. But he's going to be a guy that plays a significant amount of snaps at some point, whether that's earlier in the season, whether that's later in the season because of injury. But I do think you'll see a lot of Troy Reader. As to what his role is, whether he's linebacker two, is he starting over Drew Tranquil? I don't know. Only time will tell as far as that is concerned. But I think Reader can be an okay pass rusher. But if you're asking him to, bail you out in coverage and bail you out as a run defender, you're going to be holding your breath until he gives up some 20-yard gain. And that's kind of the read on one Troy Reader. Right now, I think that it's an okay signing, like I said, in terms of scheme familiarity. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Grade the Troy Reader signing from an A to an F. And let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, bolt up, and I will see you guys next time.